Hi, I'm Jamie Penkethman from Index Exchange, and I'm here to talk to you about universal IDs, one of the solutions that will replace third-party cookies. There's a lot of ID solutions that seek to replace the role of cookies in audience targeting, so it can be tricky for marketers and media owners to figure out which are best for them. Today, we'll take a deeper look and hopefully unravel some of the mysteries of identity after third-party cookies. Let's talk about some of the advantages of universal IDs. Authenticated universal IDs, which are based on email, offer all the benefits of people-based marketing, such as reaching a consumer across all of their devices while managing how many times they can see an impression. They also allow cross-device attribution and the ability to measure a conversion on a device that might not have seen an impression. Another big advantage with these IDs is that the way we target and measure audiences doesn't change that much with respect to what we do now. You'll still be using an identifier in audience segments for targeting. And for attribution, you are still associating the ID in an impression on a publisher site to the ID in a conversion on the brand site. As we navigate this transition, marketers have some big questions to answer, such as, which ID is right for my brand? How do I do remarketing? And will I need to use multiple IDs? How do we understand the differences between these IDs? The first thing to look at is, what type of data are you using for retargeting? First, reaching existing customers using brand first-party data from your customer database. Second, reach site visitors, retargeting, remarketing. Or reach new customers. Using third-party data, it's important to evaluate IDs according to the type of targeting that you are doing. Let's take a closer look at all of these. When reaching existing customers, the first consideration is what type of first-party data does a brand's customer database consist of? Most authenticated universal IDs are based on email addresses, so there's little to distinguish providers here using this feature beyond scale and supply. However, only some authenticated IDs are able to onboard and activate other offline PII and associate that to an online universal ID. Other types of CRM data include phone numbers, physical addresses, and first and last names. Brands need to confirm what type of offline data an ID can onboard and activate. Brands need to confirm if their ID providers can create audience segments from site visitors. If so, the brand will need to integrate some type of identity infrastructure. The big question here then is, do site visitors log in or not log in? To reach logged in site visitors, an authenticated ID would work, but marketers will have to ask ID providers if they are developing this capability. If site visitors don't log in, marketers should investigate a number of inferred IDs that can associate consumers to devices without requiring email or other types of authentication. The final area that brands need to consider when selecting universal IDs is reaching new customers with third-party audience segments. Some ID providers will offer their own marketplaces of data providers. Other ID providers will form partnerships with DMPs and third-party audience vendors. The key point here is that brands need to know which third-party audiences are most important to them and ensure that their ID providers can support that third-party data segment. There's a couple of other things that brands need to think about when evaluating IDs. CTV. More and more consumers are using connected televisions. Only some universal IDs offer associations to these devices. Marketers that want to reach consumers on CTV should confirm that ID providers can offer this capability. Next is ancillary data services. This is a big point of consideration. Do you use the ID provider here for any other data service? This includes first-party data segmentation and enrichment, offline and online measurement, or customer database identity resolution. If you are using these data services already from a provider, it's very likely that you'll consider staying within that ID provider's data ecosystem. Some final thoughts. Brands often ask if they'll need to use multiple universal IDs. The answer, possibly. There's two likely use cases that stand out. A, brands that have global operations. In this case, one universal ID might not have coverage in all regions where a brand is present. A brand will need to use more than one provider to ensure global reach. The second case is retargeting. A brand might have a relatively equal share of logged in versus non-logged in users. In this case, a brand would use an authenticated universal ID that is capable of retargeting to reach the logged in users. They will also use an inferred ID to reach non-logged in users.